hello anybody that's out there. This is Conversations on WVLP 103.1. My name is Hannah Trueblood. I am so excited to be here tonight. Happy Labor Day, everybody. Hope you've all enjoyed a day off and you thanked a union for your day off. So today, I am happy to be joined with my wonderful friend, Drew Mullen. He is the current chair for the Valparaiso Democratic Committee and avid traveler and all kinds of interesting things. So we're going to be talking about sustainability and traffic patterns and all kinds of fun, nerdy stuff. So welcome to the show, Drew.
Well, thanks for having me. This is an excellent opportunity to come out and talk about some of my passions. And thank you for the invite. And I'm excited to get the word out and get some of these, ideas out there.
Yeah, me too. This is this whole thing I'm very excited to kind of nerd out about. I've been reading this book that you recommended, Happy City, and I'm realizing that there's so much that can be done that I don't want to say that they're simple solutions, but they kind of are in a way when you really kind of peel all the layers back. So let's get into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself first. Like, who are you? What's your background? What are you doing here? All the good stuff.
Well, so I'm fairly new to Valparaiso. I've been here since 2021. Before that, I born and raised in LaPorte, Indiana, so right next door. And I've spent most of my life in the Indiana area, mostly in LaPorte. I joined the military, the Marine Corps, right out of high school, and was lucky enough to be selected for the honor guard duty. So they sent me out to Washington, D.C. We had our own private jet, and we would dress up and go to all these parties. And I was like, wow, adult life's pretty outstanding, you know.
Wow.
And, a few years after that, a real adult life hit, and no more private jet and all that. But I'm here. I work in the steel industry. I work for Cleveland Cliffs locally. In LaPorte, I was on the park board. And I started kind of going down this rabbit hole where I was looking for ideas and looking for inspiration. And I started reading some of these books. Happy City was one of them. It's one of the first books that really was an eye-opener for me because it touches on so many important things about our urban life and, the way we build our cities and how it impacts our, happiness and how it impacts us financially in so many different ways. And it's kind of one of the beginnings of the rabbit hole that I've gone down. So, that turned into a lot of different, passions. I probably read dozens of books and visited a lot of places that really excel at some of these things that are discussed in the book. And, I've just been trying to learn and, get inspired. And then I'm trying to now get the message out and see, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can, go after and make our lives better. Fix our city's balance sheets, make them stronger, make, our cities more of a, financially resilient places that encourage social interaction and more physical activity and stuff. And it's been fun, and I've had a lot of really cool experiences just this summer, actually. So I'm just constantly trying to go out and see the places that really excel. I'm looking for outliers and stuff like that. So that's usually what I focus on when I do my traveling and stuff. So.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your traveling, because that's probably one of the most fascinating things that you've doing, at least as of late, that I know about. I mean, you've been kind of all over the world looking for some solutions to bring home.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's people that have probably done a lot more traveling than I have, but, I've focused on specific areas. I've spent a lot of time in, the blue zones, like Okinawa, Japan. I was lucky enough to be stationed there during my service time. That was a fascinating place. Mm-hmm. From a land use perspective, how the people, use their land, for housing, zoning and stuff like that. I think the Japanese really set a good example there because, they don't have the affordability crisis that we tend to have because of, their approach to zoning and their approach to efficient land use and stuff like that. That's one of my biggest takeaways from the time in Japan. I've also spent some time in Ikaria, Greece, and I've looked at their lifestyle and how their diet is especially an outlier. It's considered a blue zone as well. They do a lot of local, they have a lot of gardens, so they eat a lot of local produce. They do a lot of, walking, a lot of active forms of transportation. There's a lot of social interaction. That's a big part of their, culture and stuff. And lately I've been focused a lot on like the Northern European countries, like the Netherlands and Belgium. I was in Belgium this summer because, excuse me, they're just really fantastic about their infrastructure approach and how it all ties in to some of these concepts about livability and making your cities more open. So I was just over in the Netherlands this summer for an infrastructure planning and design like training course. So you go over there and it's like nerd heaven for me. So basically I go over there and I meet with some engineers. And it's all public transportation. You fly into Amsterdam, you jump on a train, you get down to Breda, where everything was headquartered. And right away, I'm meeting with some people that they're pretty big time in the Dutch, government. There's people that are writing their national design manuals, city engineers and different officials. And we basically get to go around from city to city, walking around the city, biking around the city with these people. And we get to ask them questions and just kind of they share their philosophies on, why they do the things that they do. And I just think that, we have to be humble at times, maybe put the American exceptionalism in the back seat and look to other countries that have been maybe taking something like this more seriously or have more invested into it and they've been working at it a little bit longer, maybe have a little bit more of a refined approach. So I was over there specifically looking for those like concrete details and steps that we can make, to make our community safer for kids and for people to be out on foot, people outside of the automobile. I guess there's, is what they kind of specialize in. They build their infrastructure to protect the people that are the most vulnerable, the people outside of the car. So I got a lot of really great ideas. I think there's a lot of things that would fit very well here in Valparaiso. So that's just the kind of things that I hope to get, started and get people excited about.
Yeah, that's awesome. The Blue Zones is a fascinating thing. I've been kind of going down the rabbit hole of just vitality and health and fitness and all that stuff for the sake of not just for like looking great or whatever, but just for the longevity, get past, how do you get into those triple digit numbers and not, and still be running and still be cognizant and still be all of those things. That's been a really interesting thing for me. So I love that you've experienced that, and I'd love to dive more into that. But first, I want to kind of back it up to what you were talking about going to this infrastructure training event. First, how the heck does somebody even end up in a position to go to that? Like, where do you even find that? And then second, what are some of your key takeaways that you brought home with you that you really feel like could be a good fit for Valpo?
Well, once I started really becoming passionate about this after reading books like Happy City, I read a book by Michael Colville Anderson, Copenhagen Eyes. He talks about the Danish approach to this. I started reaching out like on Twitter at the time, and you start following different people that are kind of associated with the movement, and you start asking questions, and then people start making recommendations, and so one thing leads to another. I kind of started following a really passionate urban planner from the Fort Lauderdale area, and I have family down there, and we started creating a friendship, and he invited me to a Safe Streets conference that was down in that area, talking about a lot of different things, because Florida really struggles with pedestrian safety. I think they have the most dangerous roads in the whole entire country because their cities have been really just built around the car. You'll see a lot of neighborhoods that don't even have sidewalks or anything. So there's a huge effort by a lot of passionate advocates and professionals, engineers and city planners and stuff down there to try to get it right and try to address the issue. So I went down there and attended, and then one of, the keynote speaker just happened to be one of the guys, Michael Colville Anderson, who's got a TV show, and I just read one of his books, and we ended up just hanging out all weekend, and I was talking to him and asking him questions and trying to figure out what the hang up is, like where the disconnect is, and here in the U.S. And it was a fascinating conversation and a weekend. Just to get to meet somebody like that, it was writing the books that I'm becoming obsessed with. And, he had some really interesting insights. One of them was that we have a difficult time implementing these types of things in the U.S. because we don't have universal health care. That's what he says.
Really?
Because they can quantify the savings by making, of making your population healthier. Because it just hits their bottom line with healthcare costs.
Right. But here it pays for us to stay sick.
It pays, and there's just a lot more ambiguous as far as like what is the benefit. Here we look at it more of it's like a recreation approach, quality of life. We're trying to put in bike paths and trails for people to go out on their free time and leisurely walk around and bike and enjoy the sights. And oftentimes you have to drive there and unload your bike and stuff, so it doesn't really connect to places that have the amenities that you need for daily life, which is sort of opposite of the approach in the Danish and Dutch countries, where it's just part of the transportation network. And they really just try to provide options for everybody, not just one mode. They really try to promote the most efficient modes first, and that's people walking and people biking, and they're also the cheapest and provide the most societal benefit, I suppose, if you have universal health care and you pay attention to these things. So there's a direct incentive to make your population healthier over there. So, we do have some things that we have to work on, I think. I don't think universal health care is something that's going to happen overnight, but there are very good arguments that we can make, and we're starting to see, that Americans are becoming more sedentary. We're not as healthy as we should be. We're not as healthy as the Europeans. We don't get as many steps in daily, and a lot of it has to do with our built environment. It's built around convenience. It's built around the car. We're spread out. And, some of the big takeaways that I took from, the Dutch training is that, you learn about what it really is about and what it isn't. I think a lot of people might look at the Dutch and think that they're like obsessed with bikes. You might think that you'd go over there and see people with Schwinn shirts or, Dutch bike shirts, and they're really into it, and they have like spandex and different things, but it's really not about the bike at all. The bike is just a piece of the city. It's just an efficient mode of transportation that they use because it doesn't impact the environment. It's very efficient as far as energy use, and they fit within the city. You don't struggle to find space to park them, although that is a big problem over there, and they do spend a lot of money organizing bike parking and stuff like that.
I can imagine.
But it's much less than, trying to find places to fit all the cars, as we're seeing here in Valpo, the cost. And over there, it's just a lot more about efficiency. Here we prioritize the most expensive and least efficient mode, and over there, it's the exact opposite. They prioritize the least expensive and most efficient mode. They say with a bike lane, you can move 7 times as many people as you can with a car lane that's the same width. So
interesting.
Really the question switches to from moving vehicles to moving people. So we have all these different ways we can move people around our cities. And for some reason, we've fixated on the one that's a little bit more unhealthy, takes up a lot of space, and is very expensive. So I would suggest that we just try to split that up a little bit. Like I go over there and I actually do like traffic counts and stuff. Like I'll be in the intersections counting pedestrian, bike user, public transit, car, just try to see like what the ratios and stuff are,
right.
know, and if you look, like I go down to Carmel, Indiana, I'll do a lot of counts on the port, I'll do counts here in Valpo, I've done a lot of counts in Europe. In a lot of busy intersections in like Amsterdam, you'll have about a third will still be in automobiles, and a third will be either biking or walking, and then the other third will be transit, which is a balanced approach, which
right.
is something that you should aim for. And I think that's kind of the message that we need to get out there, because it's touchy, because the car culture is very important in the U.S.
Right.
It's part of our culture here, and it's part of our like individual identity, right? So I don't want to vilify car ownership, or car use. I just would I want to encourage that people think about how it impacts our society if we are overusing it. If you expect a parking space to be available 5 feet away from every destination, I mean, that's not going to work for a city.
No.
We have 34,000 people. That's going to work for a small club maybe or something like that, but you quickly run out of space, and it's very expensive. So, and that's one of the things Happy City touches on, is like the direct costs of the infrastructure. I mean, this book I think was written quite a few years ago now, 2015 maybe.
I think it was 2013.
2013. But by 2013 numbers, Charles is saying that the travel lane is about $1 million per mile per lane, and surface parking spaces are about $4,000. and then garage spaces are about $25,000.
Wow.
Well, in 2024 numbers, that's got to be, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's very, very expensive,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, kind of take some of these facts and figures out of this book and kind of have them retouch on it, 10 years later in a new economy. What does this actually mean, and how right were they in terms of their predictions and stuff as well? Because it seems like a lot of people that have talked about these issues, even dating back to like the section I'm at in this book right now, they were just talking about the auto industry in the early 1920s and where this obsession with cars over pedestrians kind of became a thing, and how that was really directed by the auto industry, which it's very I feel like that bleeds into every major issue that we have. If you really trace it back, it'll usually stem to some sort of corporation pulling strings somewhere where now generations later, it just is what it is. And what are we supposed to do with this now? So to hear kind of about what other people are doing in other developed areas of the world, it's important. It's important. And it is interesting what you were saying, like, car culture is 100%. We're all about the cars, and we love the cars, rightfully so. I mean, the auto industry has done a lot of great things for our economy here in the country, and have really put us forward in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, who's really winning? Because I feel like we're seeing more and more incidences of people getting hit by cars, and more car accidents just in general. And as things become more populated and the population density increases, is the answer cars? I would probably say the answer is no.
Yeah, I would say we need to move away from a more balanced approach, and cars need to be used when they're more appropriate for longer trips, from going from here to another city, not necessarily from here 2 miles away to the store or something like that. And then when it comes to the safety, we're experiencing a crisis in the U.S. Over the last decade, pedestrian fatalities are up like 77% in the U.S. And the thing that really bothers me about this, as you really dig into it, is that it's decreasing to almost zero in a lot of these other cities around the world. In Oslo, I believe they went an entire year without a single pedestrian fatality. And that's a pretty large city. I think they have like 700,000 people in Oslo.
That's a pretty big deal.
It's a capital city, and they've done a lot of bold things, but they've proved that it works. That's where Vision, Zero comes into play. That's a thing that Scandinavian countries have really ran with. And it's very startling, because there's a few other books that I could recommend to you. One is by Angie Schmidt. She runs a pedestrian safety firm out of Cleveland, Ohio. And she's fantastic. She has a book called Right of Way. And in this book, she talks about distracted driving.
Oh, God.
And how the smartphone adoption has been identical in European and some Asian, countries and stuff like that. Yet, distracted driving is a much bigger problem here in the U.S. So we like to try to blame distracted driving, a lot of these other things, but she suggests that it's the way we've designed our infrastructure makes the people more likely to be distracted. So a lot of this stuff, it can be counterintuitive, but she would make the argument that you need to make drivers feel more uncomfortable by narrowing the lanes, by adding more physical obstructions, barriers, bollards, chicanes, all kinds of different traffic calming measures, speed tables and stuff like that, well, like the Europeans have done. And that comfort zone, once that's removed, drivers are much less likely to take their eyes off the road because they don't want to damage their vehicle.
Right.
And I mean, that could sound like a cynical type of approach, but if you start to follow the data, it makes a lot of sense, And then just being over there and seeing exactly the Dutch really have it dialed in. They use visual cues, visual narrowing, texture, color coding, all kinds of different things to send different signals to the drivers so that they know you're entering a pedestrian area or you're entering a residential zone. So you need to be cautious, and you feel it. Even as a foreigner that doesn't have a lot of experience there, right away, even if you don't speak their language, you've entered a different area. There's a lot of places where you're not even allowed to bike. You have to get off your bike and push because they don't want conflicts. They try to erase conflicts. One of my biggest takeaways after what I've experienced here in Valparaiso with my daughter's incident, which we could get into later, but I was specifically looking at how they deal with intersections and conflicts.
Yeah.
With like signal phasing and stuff. And what I found all throughout the country, we were in Rotterdam, we were in Utrecht, we were in Breda, Amsterdam. They have conflict-free signal phasing in all their intersections. So at no point will there ever be a situation where a signal is given for a pedestrian to walk, and then a simultaneous signal is given for a car to turn and enter the crosswalk while pedestrians are in the crosswalk, which I thought was a pretty good idea, and that's something that I think we should try to strive for here as well. So they have separate space, separate phasing, and they have separate space for the bikes, separate space and phasing for the pedestrians and for the vehicles as well. And then it's dynamic so that they try to optimize flow through the intersections and stuff. And you'll see a lot of situations where there's dozens of people on bikes and 50 people on foot, and then there's a lot of vehicles moving through, but they move through like kind of a symphony, very organized. Cars yield to pedestrians and bikes. It's just like a foregone conclusion. You're never going to have a problem. Everybody understands that. Mm-hmm. You have the responsibility as a car driver over there because your vehicle can cause and inflict a lot of damage on the environment and on the residents. So you have to be more responsible. They have strict liability over there. So I think that we sort of need the same approach, especially like around our schools and stuff, to have signal phasing that creates conflicts.
It's crazy to me.
Should not be something that we see in this day and age,
I feel like no turn on red should just be like what it is. You don't turn right on red. It is pedestrians forward. It seems like such a simple solution, and there's obviously some powers at play and some reasoning behind why we haven't made that transition yet. Mm-hmm. And I almost feel like it's less about an actual issue and more about just a lack of people understanding how simple it really would be and how it'd be significant, of course, because we would be saving lives and it would change the way that people have to look and be out in public, but generally low on the list of, major life-changing alternatives. Yeah. Like we're not completely restructuring everything of how you're shopping or what you're doing or anything like that. It just has to do with increasing safety, and that should be, in my opinion, you would think it'd be like an easy yes.
Yeah, and we've started it around the schools and around sensitive areas, and I think everybody can get on board with that. I think in the downtown, I think anywhere we have a large amount or we want a large amount of people to be out on foot or bike, we need to take these extra precautions, because if driver convenience is the top priority, then you're going to have conflicts. We've had too many close calls in the city of Valparaiso. Already this year that I'm aware of, we've had 6 school zone crashes in a city of 34,000 people. That should not be acceptable. And the day before I left for the Netherlands, there was a 14-year-old kid pinned underneath of a truck.
Yep.
And that was a very serious incident. And we're very lucky that that young man survived. I heard it was very serious.
Yeah,
he was to be airlifted and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thankfully, I think last I heard he was doing all right. So that was a little while ago, but yeah, that's crazy. So we're on WVLP 103.1. I'm Hannah Trueblood on Conversations, and tonight we're talking with Drew Mullen about traffic safety and pedestrian first design in this urban world that we're in. So I think we kind of covered some of the things that you've seen in other countries. You've brought back some really great ideas. Let's kind of step that back a little bit and talk about your own personal experience. You mentioned your daughter, and this is actually how I met you last year. You were talking about it at a city council meeting. So what was that story that you want to share, and how that impacted you?
Well, it's been almost 2 years now. It was fairly recent. Just after I had moved to Valparaiso, and this whole journey of mine started well before this incident happened. So this isn't just like something that lit my fire. I mean, I had been going down this road. I had read The Right of Way, Angie's book about the pedestrian safety crisis, 2 years before this happened. So for it to happen to my daughter is just it's just added fuel to the fire, and it's just made me realize that I can't just hold this all in. I need to get out and start to spread the message. So, so my daughter and her mother, 2 years ago, nearly, they were on their way to school. My daughter was in first grade. She was 6 years old at the time. And her mother, they would typically park at the Growing Kids because we would take her to Growing Kids. And she goes to Cook's Corners that are right across the street. And so we were just used to that. And sometimes the drop-off line could be sort of chaotic and stuff. So her mom parked at the Growing Kids, and they were walking across Bullseye right there in the crosswalk. And they hit the button, waited for the signal, just like you're supposed to do, and there was a truck that was trying to turn left to head, what would that be, east down Bullseye, right? Mm-hmm. So what is going on in that intersection is that the signals are simultaneous. So at the time that you get the signal to walk, when you get the walk signal, in between a daycare and a school, the drivers also get the green light to turn. Mm. So there was a misunderstanding. The driver was under the influence of alcohol, and as there's no, this is a little bit difficult, but there's in a lot of different places you'll see refuge islands, and they do what they can to minimize the time you're in the conflict zone.
Right.
They'll either raise the table, or they'll provide a refuge island with bollards and stuff like that to provide people a little bit of protection in case there's a runaway vehicle or something like that. So they're a few feet out into the intersection when the collision happens, and the truck driver just continues after striking them and just completely runs them over, just all the way.
Oh, gosh.
Until he's completely out of the frame. I don't think he stopped until like 30 feet later or something. Fortunately, my daughter was small enough that the truck just passed right over her, and she just popped up.
That's insane.
But her mother, unfortunately, suffered some very serious injuries, and she had to be in physical rehab. She had 18 total fractures, and she was a new mother at the time. It was her first day out of the hospital after giving birth to her son, and it was just a horrible experience to see. I mean, she was crushed across the midsection, and it was tough to see her have to go through something like that. And I've just felt ever since then to be, really just been driven to try to get the word out there that we can do better. Mm-hmm. A lot of people want to write it off as a drunk driver, and I don't see it that way. I think if we had the proper signal phasing, I don't care what happened. I don't think that we're going to be creating those conflicts. And we have to realize that every day there's going to be opportunities for people to be passing through these intersections. They're going to be distracted. They're going to be under the influence of something. Mm-hmm. And we have to do what we can. That's a big part of the Dutch approach, is that they assume people are going to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. They know drivers are going to make errors. So what can we do proactively to make things safer? So, yeah, that's something that we've had to go through, and it's made it difficult because we don't always agree about how we should get around town. I like to try to bike, to try to set the example. I try to be the intrepid biker out there, just using my bike to get around, to kind of live the way I want to live and stuff like that. But, her mother doesn't always feel that's appropriate. She doesn't feel it's safe. And I respect her opinion. And she does have a point, because we don't really have the safety built in. It's a car first mindset. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry that happened, and I'm glad that she ended up, she was treated and everything was good, and your daughter was all right. I have a child, a son. He's going to be 7, and that's like the same age, and it just, it makes me so nervous. That's why we live so close to our school. We go to TJ, mm-hmm. and I will never, until they are, even as adults, I don't think I would let them cross Roosevelt without me, because I just don't trust that the cars are going to stop, because they don't always. I see them almost mow down the crossing guard there often, and it just is crazy to me. And I love the idea of that. Where was that in the Dutch design? Is that where it is? Where they have the colors and everything to kind of force you to be aware of a change. That's so novel here, but
the Dutch, they have a lot of different ways they go about things. one of the things that they're really good at is, one, differentiating the different lanes. Bike lanes are usually red asphalt, which just sends that visual signal that this is a space for bikes, and then they use like speed tables, or they call them continuous sidewalks. So like in our downtown, when you're walking through the sidewalks and you're going to cross the street, you drop down into the street, right, which is the car domain. Right.
So
Over there, the sidewalks just continue along. So it's a continuous sidewalk, which makes it easier for people with disabilities. But it also sends a signal to the car drivers that once you enter that speed table or that continuous sidewalk, you're in the pedestrians domain.
You're in the pedestrian
zone. So
zone.
Kind of flipped the script.
That's
over there.
Genius. And I'm glad that you said too about your you two having the differing opinions about how to get through town, because I have such conflicting feelings about that myself. I love to walk. I love to ride my bike. Joe and I, you'll always see us out and about doing stuff. Like we love riding our bike down to VU and all of that. And there's so much, but at the same time, I don't want to do it with my kids because I don't even feel 100% safe doing it myself for multiple reasons. One, for the cars. People are not always paying attention. Thankfully, we have bells and we always ding them at anybody that drives by us. But it's an enjoyable thing. But there's also that little cloud in the back of your mind that reminds you that this is a very dangerous activity that you're participating in, and you got to be super careful. The other thing about that is that I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. Our bike lanes are very incomplete. And they start and they stop and they start again and they stop again. They're not maintained very well. I find myself frequently having to leave the safe, quote unquote, safe bike area to avoid debris that's in the road and, cracks in the concrete that are not being patched and stuff like that. And even losing kind of sight of where the bike lane even is, because in certain areas the paint isn't there anymore. And I know that the Parks Department and the city are working on that, and I know that is a priority item for them. They're working on the bike paths and the trails, connecting more of them through the city in a long-term plan. But how do we kind of get into that mindset and really encourage people to utilize those resources and bike and walk and get around however you need to get around that's not in a car, when those modes of transportation aren't really very safe to participate in right now because of the infrastructure being car forward? I feel like we're in a catch-22 here.
It is a bit disturbing, as somebody that uses a bike almost exclusively to get around. I run into this all the time. I try to use my bike for everything. I take it to Home Depot. I take it to the grocery store. I take it pretty much everywhere I go. And there are a lot of areas where it is just incomplete. You run into a lot of situations like on Silhavy. It's quite nice for most of the way, like on my way to Menards or something like that. But there's a lot of areas like when you get to the railroad tracks where it just ends. Somehow we've figured out a way to make it, nice for car drivers, but, for the bike path or the multi-use trail, there's no cohesion there. There's no follow through to make sure that it actually connects. So you have to go out into oncoming traffic, if you're heading north.
Right.
And that's, it just shouldn't be that way. That's stuff that we can figure out. But then when you get down to the traffic circles, the traffic circle, especially the one on Silhavy and Lincoln Way, is really a hostile place to be when you're outside of a vehicle. And that's because that's the way it was designed. I shared that picture of some of our traffic circles in our design philosophy with the Dutch engineers, and they just looked at it like, oh my, what are you guys doing? You cannot have designs like this. They have a completely different approach, which I could share with anybody that wants to take a deeper conversation. I've got pictures, I've got videos. I think I'm going to make a video just doing a comparative analysis that I'll just put out there for everybody to see. But ours, it's really just about prioritizing vehicle traffic and vehicle traffic flow. And pedestrians, unfortunately, they're not really looked at as equal, almost maybe like a nuisance in the design intentions there. So according to the Dutch, we can't have double lanes for cars and at-grade pedestrian crossings. They're incompatible. You either have to put a tunnel in or find an alternate route where you can provide a safer crossing. And you'll see that in almost all of our traffic circles. Even right next to the university, we've got the same thing. We've got slip lanes and double lanes, stuff that's just not a best practice. It's fairly new projects. And we do have another traffic circle going in right next to our downtown, from what I understand.
Yeah, in the works. That is at 2028 or something like that.
You know, with the proximity to the downtown, I hope the design intentions could be a little bit different, to maybe even the playing field, to make it more of a traffic circle that promotes, you know, other modes of transportation, more efficient modes of transportation that we want to see in our downtown. So,
well, especially since in these European countries, there's a lot of roundabouts out there, right? Is that?
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
So it'd be, in my eyes, it'd be pretty easy to kind of take a look at those systems and say, okay, how can we Americanize it? Because we have to Americanize everything and make it work. Because that's an excellent spot to kind of have a proof of concept and to really set the standard for the way that we move forward in redeveloping and kind of redesigning as we're growing.
Yeah, and from my conversation with some of the engineers in my course, there was engineers from Canada and Switzerland, Singapore. There's people from all over the world take this course, so I'm talking with them, trying to pick their brains. And a big problem that we have in North America is there's no language in our traffic design manuals that say that you can make cars yield to bikes. You know what I mean? So our safety language and policy makes things more unsafe. You know what I mean? We have to keep our lane widths at highway standards for fire, emergency vehicles and stuff like that. And these are arguments that you start to run into when you really start to push the envelope about just copying the Dutch approach, because they have, over decades, they've worked a lot of these things out, and they've come up with brilliant solutions. And we're just not really there yet. We're not overnight going to be able to shrink the size of our fire trucks and this and that. So there is a balanced approach that we need to take, but I think that there's a way to go about it. I think that you could eliminate some of the slip lanes and, incorporate some more of the Dutch type philosophy in. It's like you said, Americanized, kind of meet in the middle a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I hope that, we can keep this conversation going and, make an impact on this next traffic circle. That would make me, pretty happy.
We'll have to see what we can do. This is a call out, everybody.
Yeah.
Get interested in this roundabout. Figure out what's going on. Let's make it pedestrian friendly. So we're talking big scale stuff here tonight on this Conversations with Drew Mullen about safety and design and things that don't happen overnight. And we're looking at these countries that have really dedicated decades to establish this and to make sure that when these things inevitably came into their communities, that they were looked at differently and that they were treated differently. And here in America and in Indiana, and even smaller here in Valparaiso, it's just etched in. It's just in. And so it can become very easily overwhelming for people, myself, and probably you. I can imagine looking at all these issues and just going mad, thinking oh my gosh, how are we ever gonna get past this roadblock of, no pun intended, of all these issues, because they're just so big and it requires so much to really do a total overhaul on the societal ideologies of cars and pedestrians and stuff. So what are some ways that you would suggest that we as individuals can kind of tackle this problem together on a small scale that's easy for anybody to kind of pick up and do or think about? Or
Well, what I would suggest is, one, people have to get involved. I mean, we have to demand, if we want safe streets, if we want a place where our children can ride their bikes and, we don't have to worry and we don't have to feel like we're bad parents for letting them out into the city, we have to create space for them to navigate safely. We have to create separation between them and the other modes of traffic. And, we have to come together as a community and say, this is what we want. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I think in one of Chuck Marone's books, he wrote a book called Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. And in the book, he says that when it comes to the street design and engineering department and stuff like that, they're not the ones that should be dictating the design intentions. The community should come to them and say, this is what we want. We want complete streets. We want safety. We want a more integrated multimodal approach. You make sure it's built properly. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think for too long, we've just kind of let the engineers dictate and just kind of go with the flow and go with the status quo and just build this, car first, infrastructure. But, things are starting to change. And I think the places that you've seen some of the most progress, like New York City with Jeanette Sada-Khan and her approach, more of like a tactical urbanism approach where you just go out with traffic cones and just take over and shut down different areas and stuff like that. That is also very powerful. Tactical urbanism is a huge part because the city doesn't have the resources to go out and just address all these different concerns and stuff like that. But the citizens know. Mm-hmm. So we can go out and we can use temporary materials. Some of this is done covertly usually, but, you usually want to work with the city and try to make it something that everybody can agree on and not cause too many conflicts or be too, argumentative about it. But in Jersey City, I just went to the Strong Towns National Gathering this summer down in Cincinnati, and the keynote speaker there was Barka Patel from Jersey City. And what they did, she gave a brilliant presentation, which I'd be happy to share with people. But what they've done, and this is pretty remarkable for the U.S., for a city a mile and a half outside of New York City, they went an entire year without a traffic fatality.
In America?
In the U.S., and they just did a no excuses approach. Vision Zero, they're just going to start carving out space. So they took whatever they had laying around, dented up traffic barrels, cones, tennis court paint, and they just started getting after it. They closed off some areas to make like public squares or pedestrian corridors and stuff like that. And then they started to carve out some separated space for bicycles. And they used the traffic cones. They used temporary materials, but they started to carve out that space for people and put in that physical separation. And then the cones were replaced by more permanent infrastructure, some concrete barriers. I mean, it doesn't have to be like researched and engineered project all the time. There's a lot of things you can just do with plastic delineators and some tennis court paint, and just show people we're going to reorganize this. And see what happens, and you got to study. So tactical urbanism is something I would encourage people to look into. There's a book, Street Fight, by Jeanette Sada-Khan. She is incredible. She told Mayor Bloomberg when she was the transport secretary in New York City that she had an idea to close Broadway and Times Square to cars. And he's like, well, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. And then 20 minutes later, she had him convinced. So they went out there with traffic cones, and they just blocked it off. And they were looking around at each other, and they're like, well, nothing's happening. Now what do we need? They're like, go get some chairs. So they went and got lawn chairs, and they just started popping them up in the area. And right away, people just started filling in, putting them in circles so they could have conversations and stuff like that. And it was a hit, And what she did to kind of sell them that idea was that she studied the space. She counted the traffic, and she showed them that, look, 80% of the people moving through this area are on foot. Mm-hmm. Yet 82% of the space is handed over to vehicles. If we do this and do this way and then move the traffic lanes over here and change this turn to this, we can make things better for everybody. Mm-hmm. And it worked. It sped up car traffic. It made a much nicer place for people on foot. Retail rents increased and became one of the most sought after retail spaces in the world. Actually, I think it's in the top 3. And it became safer. And that's because she studied. She went out and took the counts. So that's another thing that I would suggest. If anybody's really passionate about this issue, there's an app called Counterpoint. Counterpoint. You can do it right on your phone. And what this does that differentiates from a lot of the traffic counts that you'll see with the little rubber strips, it gives you an idea of everybody that's out. Male on a bike, female, children, pedestrians, public transit. So it gives you the whole picture. And you can try to study the space and how it's currently being used, and then kind of use that as a reference to gauge what you want to see, or compare it to another city. Like if I go downtown Valpo, usually I count right there by Orville. I'll sit next to him, with my suspenders on, so we look alike, and I'll count the traffic on Lincoln Way. And then I'll compare it to like Carmel, Indiana, for example, or LaPorte, Indiana. And what you'll find is that like in LaPorte, in the downtown area, 95% of the trips are by car. In Valpo, it's usually more like 70%, which is good because we've done a lot of good things here. But then you go down to Carmel, and it's 70% of people are on foot.
Right.
Which is where we want to be.
Right.
That's the kind of, we have to build the infrastructure that that produces the type of traffic that we want. And that should be the goal in a downtown area, because if you look at these buildings and the way the traditional design and everything was in the U.S., you don't see garage doors on the buildings in our downtowns. They're picture windows.
Right.
And doors for people. So that means that the design intentions were for them to be 3-mile-an-hour cities, for people to walk past, look into the windows, see what was on sale, and, interact with other people and live above and stuff like that. And as we've turned them into more 30-mile-an-hour cities, a lot of cities, not so much here. I think Valpo's got a really nice downtown. We've done a lot of great things. But like in my hometown of LaPorte, the downtown has really struggled over the years because of the amount of car traffic that we've got. And we've got 7 lanes for cars in our downtown.
Downtown LaPorte is a nightmare.
It's tough. And it's tough to get people to live upstairs. So a lot of the buildings of the upper units are still just boarded up.
Right.
Very low. There's a lot of vacancy and stuff. And it's tough to, turn a 3-mile-an-hour city into a 30-mile-an-hour city and still have it function as it was intended. So
there have been some talks from different people kind of about the idea of downtown Valpo and the question of, is it possible to convert any bit of it into pedestrian only because of the way that it's laid out? I mean, like Lincoln Way, it's that main thoroughfare, it's 130, it's LaPorte, Route 2, it's all of those things. So we've got the major highway traffic coming through the city. So how do we set it up in a way or build it up in a way to where, is there a place where we can have pedestrian only traffic in downtown Valpo? Is that even a possibility? Or what would you say, just from your experience being around and seeing what other people are doing, what's the direction that, if you were in charge of that, what would you do with it?
Well, absolutely. And it all comes down to political will. I've made this argument in LaPorte, and I've made this argument around here in a lot of places. And I've said that we should close the section right there between the park and the pavilion.
Permanently, right?
I know that we close it periodically for events and stuff like that, but yeah, that shouldn't be open to vehicles. I don't think at all, really. You need to just start creating more space, and you get a lot of pushback, because Michigan City tried it and that didn't work or something like that. But you really have to have like a good approach to this. You want to have networks of alternative modes, like we'd want to have some pathways, more cohesive, alternative modes for people to get to the downtown, to get to some of these, because if you still want people to drive to the pedestrian zone, then, it creates even more problems. But what I would like to say is that if New York City can do it in Times Square, I think we could do it in Valparaiso, and one of my journeys this summer was to Ghent, Belgium, which implemented a radical circulation plan for cars and made their entire city center car free. And it was very, very controversial. And they just did this within the last 3 years. So I wanted to go over there and talk with some of the people and get their opinion on it now that it's about 3 years in. So when I read about this initially, I found that the city officials had to have security details following around because they received death threats from a lot of the business owners saying that if you pull the vehicles out of the downtown, all the businesses are going to collapse and blah, blah, blah. But they pushed forward anyway, right? And so I had to go see it for myself. So I flew in, rode the train down. Couldn't have been any easier. I popped on the train. A couple hours later, I was in Ghent. And I just jumped off the train, walked to my hotel, easily found it. And it was just such a fantastic experience to be in that city. And some of the people I met, some of the places that I saw, it just really changes your perspective, and I would just ask them flat out. I'm like, you've been here your entire life. I know this was controversial. I know it might have impacted you. What do you feel about it now? And they talk about their city, like they talk about falling in love. It's just incredible how it's changed the city. And you just walk around. I do my traffic counts, and I saw 600 people on foot within 15 minutes. 350 people on bikes, right in the city center. 3 cars. Mm-hmm. That was it. And you see kids playing, and there's restaurants and bars with terrace seating everywhere you look. And, it's just, it really brings people together. You know what I mean? It's quiet. It's such a beautiful city, and it's like a medieval city center. So there's wonderful architecture, and they've done such a good job investing in the urban vitality, and they bring people in, and they get together. I was lucky to be over there for the Euros. Mm-hmm. So I was there in the city center watching the Belgian national team take on Romania, and we were packed in, sitting together, Indian style, packed in like sardines, and eating their crazy little machis, fish, specialties that they have over there. And it was just a great experience. And it's all enabled by, their choice to do that. So I would just say that in a city, I think Ghent has a population of about 300,000 people.
Okay.
And they have auto manufacturing. They have a big economy. They have a lot of restaurants. They have a lot of economic activity going on in the city, a lot of businesses that need deliveries and stuff like that. I mean, much, much larger scale than Valparaiso. And they find a way to make it happen. Mm-hmm. Deliveries are from 7 in the morning until 11 a.m., Monday through Friday. That's when you bring it in, because that's when people are not really out in force on foot and stuff like that. So you have an opportunity there where you're going to reduce the conflicts and still be able to get it done. They'd use a lot of cargo bikes to make deliveries in the city center. And, it's just great ideas, and you'll find a way to make it happen, and I think that a lot of times people think that the cost will exceed the benefit, but it's very obvious after being over there. That's the other way around. I mean,
right. The
benefits are just enormous. It makes it safer. And it makes it much more inviting. The business owners love it. And I would just say that we should push for it. It's not popular. It's not common in the U.S., but it could make Valparaiso stand out.
Yeah.
And make it a special place that people come to see. Instead of me flying over to Ghent, maybe people could fly into Valparaiso to see what we've done. So
the true gem of Northwest Indiana.
There's no reason we couldn't do it. We've already started. So
Right. Well, the one thing that I love, I think the most about this is that, yes, these are big ideas and they take time to obviously implement, but it is you get an immediate return on that, because as soon as you take those cars away, or you restrict those cars, or you put them somewhere else and you prioritize the pedestrian, then like you said, you'll have a ton more people walking immediately. You have a ton more people biking immediately. You'll have less, hopefully, traffic incidents immediately.
Yeah.
And then that goes on and on and on, and it gets better as it catches on, and you get to enjoy that for generations. So it's a cool, a rare thing. I feel like a lot of big overhaul policy, even once it comes into effect, it takes a while for you to really see the benefit of it, especially in controversial things like that. But when it comes to the traffic patterns, that's an immediate gratification of that work.
Yeah.
And that's a really neat thing. And I love being able to kind of talk about this, because for such a big thing as it is, it doesn't seem to be talked about on the main channels very often. And
it's a touchy subject that I've found. I've got a lot of family in the car business.
Right.
Sometimes they might feel personally attacked, but it's just something I can't, once you start to see it, once you read these books like Happy City, it's just, you can't unsee it.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what I was getting into when I picked up this book. I just saw that thing that you shared about Kalamazoo. I was like, oh, it's like, I'm interviewing him next month. I should probably read that. That looks interesting. And then I'm sucked into this whole world. And this book, Happy City, talks about the correlation between urban design and happiness. That's kind of the overarching theme of this. And they say that, the more these dense areas where there's a bunch of cars and it's all, built up like that, it's not as conducive to happiness. And especially when we sprawl everybody out and we spread everybody out and we make us get in cars and go all the way to the other side or to the next city over to work, and to which we see a lot of. We've got a lot of Chicago commuters here. And those people are miserable in the book. And taking that and putting them in a place where they can experience nature and when they can communicate with other people and see other people and not just be in these little boxes going a million miles an hour down the road, people are happier. And when people are happier, they're healthier. And when they're healthier, they live longer. And when they're happier and healthier and live longer, we get more done as a society. So it's very much a chain reaction to, and it correlates directly to some of these other issues, like the mental health crisis that's going on in the country. I mean, we are at, staggering teen suicide rates, and over 60% or more people report feeling depression and feeling anxiety and feeling stuck and feeling like there isn't anything here for them. But then when you introduce something like this, when they can actually kind of experience life as life is maybe intended to be lived, you can connect more to that mental health and kind of help ease those issues. And we didn't even talk about the environmental.
That's just the benefit.
That's a whole other podcast episode there.
Yeah. But I think you need to look at like how the city of Valparaiso comes together during the popcorn festival when we have all these streets blocked off. I mean, it's just really thriving, and the same type of philosophy you could apply to like the fairgrounds. Nobody expects to be able to use their car to drive from ride to ride or Disney World from ride to ride, or nobody expects to be able to use their personal vehicle at the golf course. You need to use a more appropriate form of transportation, because imagine a golf course where it was just a free-for-all. I mean, the course would be ruined, and it just doesn't work, and we can't do the same thing to our cities, so I just want to try to inspire people. I know that there's, real strong feelings about this subject, but I think we can make this a place for everybody where you can drive still, but, maybe just park, a block away maybe, and then maybe we could have some shuttles set up, some golf carts. I mean, there's just so many different ways that we can move people around. We know how to do it, and we can make the city better and safer at the same time, and more environmentally friendly. Boom. Which
we love. That's like the double whammy there. Anything that we can do for Mother Earth, I'm in. Well, you've certainly inspired me because I knew nothing about any of this before I met you, and you have sent me down the rabbit hole. But I'm grateful for it. It's like I'm in the Matrix.
Yeah.
I woke up. I can't unsee it. Now I feel like I have to tell other people about it and learn more and try to figure out how to make a positive impact. So hopefully this is one of those ways, just getting that out there.
Yeah, it's like in the Matrix, you got to take the red pill, right? You don't want to just
no, I'm waking up.
Blue pill, right?
No, exactly. So last thing before we get out of here, where would you direct people to go to learn more about these types of things, and on the broad scale, just place things people to follow or any pages, and then where would somebody want to go to get involved directly here locally?
I would tell people to reach out directly to me. I would say keep an eye on the VDC. I think we're going to be trying to push a lot of these types of concepts, as part of our platform. This is something that I really believe in. I think that something our party should stand for, push for, and fight for. We're going to try to get some discussions together with some of the city officials, city engineers. We're going to try to bring people together. I already have a group of people. If anybody wants to reach out, Drew Mullen on Facebook, send me a message. You can just message me direct, send me your email. I can add you to the list. We've already started a discussion with a few people in the community that are concerned citizens and want to start moving. And then we'll move it to the next level. I'd like to create a Vision Zero task force and go out there and start collecting data. I think we all just need to get the conversation started. And I'm working on trying to put an event together here within the next few weeks where we get a few officials together and have a serious discussion. So excellent. I'll keep you posted.
I love that. So we're going to follow Drew Mullen. We're going to follow Strong Towns. We're going to go read Happy City. We're going to download Counterpoint. We're going to do some tests in our own neighborhoods and do some counts. Yes. We're going to get educated. We're going to educate others, and we're going to make people safer.
And there's City Nerd and not just bikes on YouTube. They are just fantastic. Chris and Melissa Bruntlett have a few fantastic books. I could go on and on. I could stay here for another hour or two.
Just reading.
Just going, but we'll have to, put this in text somewhere and have it posted. So we could start a book club at the press possibly, or I'm open to ideas. So reach out.
I love it. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. This is WVLP 103.1. I'm Hannah Trueblood on Conversations with Drew Mullen. Have a wonderful evening.